The front door chime of Briar Hollow Police Station rang, again, and the sound carried through the lobby like a metronome marking a ritual everyone pretended not to notice. Deputy Lyle glanced up from the blotter and saw her. A little girl, maybe 8, backpack hanging off one shoulder, hair damp from the mist outside. She didn't hesitate or ask permission. She just crossed the worn linoleum as if the place belonged on her route home, eyes fixed past the counter toward the kennel hall. Behind the chain-link gate sat Rex, Department K9, retired from patrol but still treated like a working legend. His black and tan coat catching the fluorescent glare, his breathing calm and even. Lyle lowered his voice. She's here every day. For him. The girl didn't react. Her steps were quiet. Her hand stayed locked on her backpack strap like it was a lifeline. She stopped at the gate, close enough that Rex could smell her. And usually this was the moment he would soften. Tail swish, nose to the wire. That gentle patience that made even tough officers go quiet. But today, Rex didn't move. He went still the way he used to go still before a door got kicked in, ears forward, muscles tight, eyes locking not on her face, but on the space behind her shoulder, as if the air had changed shape. The room felt smaller. A radio crackled once, then fell silent. The girl's lips parted. For a heartbeat, she looked like any other kid. Small, tired, trying to be brave. Then her gaze flicked to the lobby window, to the street, and the fear in it was too practiced. She leaned closer to the gate so only Rex and the nearest officers could hear. Her voice came out thin, urgent, certain, like she'd rehearsed it in the dark. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take him." Deputy Lyle blinked. "Take who, honey?" Rex answered first, a low, controlled rumble that wasn't a threat so much as a warning. Danger was already on the board. At the far end of the hallway, a door clicked shut. Sergeant Mallory looked up from her desk, eyes narrowing. "Who's they?" The girl's fingers tightened until her knuckles paled. She listened, head tilted, as if counting footsteps only she could hear. When she finally lifted her eyes to the officers, she said it like a confession and a headline rolled into one. "I only come here to see one dog, because he's the only one who knows what happened." In the kennel room, Rex's stare stayed fixed, unblinking, as if whatever had followed her through that door every day had finally followed her inside. In the corner by the vending machine, a man in a faded veteran ball cap, former K9 handler Clay Mercer, had been waiting quietly, listening, remembering. When Rex froze, Clay's instincts flared. That dog wasn't spooked by kids. He was tracking a problem, and the girl's words hit like a punch. This wasn't a cute routine at all. It was a plea. Days earlier, it had looked harmless, almost heartwarming, like the kind of small-town oddity people smiled at and then forgot. Every afternoon, right after the last school bell, the front door chime would sing, and the girl would appear in the lobby with the same worn backpack and the same careful posture, as if she'd learned not to take up too much space. Sometimes her cheeks were red from wind. Sometimes her hair clung to her forehead from rain. Once, she arrived dusted with pollen, sneezing into her sleeve, and still she didn't slow down. She never headed for the chairs, never hovered by the bulletin board, never asked for water. She walked straight past the counter, close enough to be seen, not close enough to be touched, and stopped at the kennel gate where Rex waited. The desk officers had tried, at first, to make sense of it with the easy explanations people reach for when they don't want trouble. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe her parents worked late. Maybe she just liked dogs. "Little Miss Rex," Deputy Lyle joked one day, grinning as he stamped paperwork. Sergeant Mallory called it community outreach in reverse, like the station was some kind of after-school club. They let her be because she was polite, quiet, and because Rex, who could rattle a grown man with a look when he was on duty, never acted threatened by her. The shift change would happen, radios would chatter, phones would ring, and in the middle of it, she'd stand there like a small statue, unzipping her backpack with slow, deliberate hands. The offering was always the same: a tiny snack wrapped in napkin paper, usually a broken biscuit or a few pieces of jerky that smelled like the corner store. She'd hold it through the chain link with her fingertips, not pushing, not teasing, just waiting. Rex would rise from his cot with that veteran economy, no wasted motion, no frantic energy. Walk to the gate, sniff once, then look at her face as if checking a password only he understood. And then, like someone dimming a room, the dog would change. The alert stiffness would drain from his shoulders, his ears would relax, his tail would move in one slow, measured sweep. He'd take the snack gently, never snapping, never slobbering, then settle down close to the gate, chin near her shoes, a guardian at rest. The girl would talk in a voice barely louder than the air vent. Little updates about school, about a test, about a classmate who stole her pencil and got caught finally. And Rex would listen with the solemn patience of a creature built for loyalty. Sometimes she didn't speak at all. Sometimes she simply watched his breathing. Like counting, it kept the world stable. On days when strangers came in, an angry boyfriend, a loud drunk, a man complaining about a speeding ticket, Rex's eyes would flick up and track them, and the girl would shift instinctively closer to the gate, letting the dog's presence become a wall between her and the noise. It was sweet, the officers told themselves. Slightly unusual, sure, but sweet. Nobody thought to ask why her backpack looked too heavy for a kid, why she never removed her jacket even in warm weather, or why Rex always watched the lobby door until she left, then stayed there a beat longer, like he was racing an invisible timer. And nobody thought to ask. Clay Mercer had learned a long time ago that dogs told the truth long before people did, and that was why he noticed the change before anyone else did. Officially, he was retired. 30 years in uniform, most of them on the far edge of things with a leash in his hand. But Briar Hollow still pulled him back when they needed a steady presence for training days or evaluations. He liked to sit where he could see without being seen, usually on the bench near the vending machine, nursing burnt coffee and letting the rhythms of the station wash over him. That's where he first saw the girl's pattern, not as a curiosity, but as a behavior loop, tight and consistent, the way threat cycles always were. Rex would be resting, eyes half-lidded, the posture of a dog finally allowed to age. Then the door chime would ring, and Rex would shift before the sound finished echoing. Not excitement, not anticipation, readiness. Clay watched the ears come up, the spine straighten, the breath change. When the girl stepped into view, Rex didn't just relax the way a friendly dog would. He recalibrated, scanning angles, checking lines of sight, positioning himself between her and the open lobby like a shield that knew exactly where to stand. Clay felt the old instincts click on, clean and quiet. He began to watch the girl the way he used to watch suspects through reflective glass, cataloging without staring. She flinched at sudden sounds, but not all of them, only the sharp ones. Keys dropped, a door slammed. She scanned the hallway every time she arrived. A quick sweep left to right, like she was checking exits, like she'd learned the map by heart. She never sat near the duty desk, never leaned close to Mallory's office, and she always shifted her weight away from one particular patrolman when he crossed the lobby, even though the man never spoke to her. Clay clocked that too. Kids didn't avoid randomly. Avoidance had a logic. The backpack bothered him next. Too worn for a kid her age, straps reinforced with duct tape, zipper tugged shut like it carried something precious or dangerous. When she knelt by the gate, she kept her back straight and her hands visible, a posture Clay recognized from compliance training, from people who had learned that small mistakes brought consequences. Rex mirrored it, head level, body calm but coiled, his eyes flicking up whenever the outer door opened. This wasn't a dog being comforted by a child. This was a dog assigned to watch over one. Clay tested the theory quietly. One afternoon, he rolled a chair back a few inches too fast. The girl startled, and Rex shifted, blocking her with his shoulder, a controlled movement that said, "Protect without panic." Another day, Clay let a stranger linger too long near the gate. Rex stared the man down until he moved, then checked the girl, then the door again. Clay's jaw tightened. He remembered deployments where dogs were used as early warning systems, living sensors tuned to danger patterns humans missed because they wanted peace too badly. The officers laughed it off. He's a softie with her. Must remind him of a kid from his past. But Clay knew better. Rex wasn't reminiscing. He was working a detail. And the girl, for all her quiet politeness, was behaving like someone counting down minutes, not up. Clay finished his coffee and stood, stretching the stiffness from his knees, eyes never leaving the pair at the gate. Whatever story the station thought it was telling itself, it was wrong. This wasn't a cute ritual. It was a protective operation running on borrowed time. The day the pattern broke, the sky did it first, rolling over Briar Hollow like a lid slammed shut, turning the afternoon into a dim, wet bruise of light. Cold rain needled the station windows in steady lines, and the wind pushed it sideways, rattling the flagpole out front until it sounded like a nervous tapping. Shift change had come and gone. The lobby smelled faintly of damp uniforms and old coffee. By the time the door chime finally rang, it was later than usual. Late enough that Deputy Lyle had already joked, "Guess Little Miss Rex finally found a normal hobby," and Sergeant Mallory had replied without looking up, "Don't jinx quiet." Then the girl appeared, and the joke died on Lyle's tongue. She stepped inside with her head down, hood soaked through, hair plastered to her cheeks, and for a second she just stood on the mat, as if she'd forgotten how to move. Her backpack hung crooked, heavier than ever, and her sleeves were pulled down so far they nearly swallowed her hands. Clay Mercer felt the shift in his gut before his brain named it. Fear had weight, and she carried it like a stone. She didn't walk straight to the kennel gate this time. She paused, eyes flicking to the right, toward the hallway, and then to the left, toward the front window, like she was triangulating something. "Hey, kiddo," Lyle called gently, softening his voice the way adults do when they sense a child might bolt. "You okay?" The girl nodded too quickly, the kind of nod that answered the question someone didn't ask. I'm fine," she whispered. But her voice was small and scraped, like she'd been practicing bravery through clenched teeth. Clay watched her hands, tucked, hidden, gripping fabric. Rex, behind the gate, rose with sudden precision, ears pricked, body rigid, not the gentle welcome he'd offered all week. His gaze wasn't on her face. It was locked over her shoulder. A low growl rolled from his chest, controlled and professional, the sound of a warning delivered with restraint. The lobby chilled. Mallory straightened in her chair. "Rex," she said, more surprised than stern. The girl flinched at the sound of the dog's growl, not because she was afraid of him, Clay realized, but because she knew what it meant. Someone had followed her closer than they should have. A man stood near the vending machine. Clay had seen him earlier, lingering like he belonged, wearing a faded jacket that didn't match the weather and a cap pulled low. He held a soda he hadn't opened. He wasn't in uniform, wasn't a regular, and yet he had chosen the spot with a clear view of the kennel hall. When the girl's eyes lifted, they met his for the briefest second. And in that second, Clay saw recognition flash across her face like a match strike. Quick, bright, gone. The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a warning, and then he looked away too fast like he'd been caught on camera. Rex's growl deepened by half a note, and his posture shifted, shoulder angled toward the girl, as if to block her. "Can I help you?" Mallory asked the man, voice turning official. "Just passing by," he said, too smooth, lifting the soda as if it explained his presence. "Saw the lights on. Thought I'd grab a drink." He didn't meet Mallory's eyes when he spoke. He watched the girl through his peripheral vision, the way predators do when they pretend they aren't hunting. The girl shrank instinctively, shoulders curling inward, sleeves tugged lower, and Clay felt something old and hot rise behind his ribs. The man took one step toward the door, then another, suddenly eager to leave, and the station's front chime rang again as he pushed out into the rain, moving with a speed that didn't match someone just passing by. Rex didn't relax when the doors shut. He stayed rigid, nose working, ears forward, staring at the glass like he expected it to open again. The girl swallowed, eyes shiny but dry, and leaned toward the gate as if the wire fence was the only solid thing in the room. "Please," she breathed, voice barely there. "I'm late because I had to make sure he didn't see where I live." Clay's gaze sharpened, the pieces clicking into a shape he didn't like. This wasn't a child visiting a dog for comfort. This was a child using the station as cover. And whatever followed her through the rain had just proven it knew exactly where to find her. Clay waited until the lobby noise returned to its normal volume, until the phones rang again and someone laughed too loudly at a bad joke, before he moved, because he'd learned that if you confronted a rot too fast, it simply learned to hide deeper. He watched the girl press her forehead to the chain link for a second, breathing in a way that looked like she was trying to borrow calm from Rex's steady chest. Then he saw Mallory guide her gently toward the chairs with a cup of water and the kind of practiced kindness that still didn't ask the right questions. Clay followed at a respectful distance, keeping his hands in his pockets, letting the room believe he was just an old dog man lingering where he always lingered. But his eyes stayed on details. The girl's sleeves were pulled down past her palms, and when she reached for the cup, her fingers trembled with more than cold. A faint mark, purple blooming under skin, peeked out near her wrist before she tugged the cuff lower again, quick as a guilty thought. Clay felt his jaw lock. When Mallory stepped away to answer a call, Clay leaned slightly toward the girl, voice low and soft. "Hey, kiddo. You did the right thing coming here." Her eyes flicked up to him and then away, scanning like she couldn't afford to look at any adult for too long. Rex watched them both, silent, ears still forward. Clay straightened and walked toward the captain's office because stations had two kinds of leadership, the kind that faced problems and the kind that survived them by pretending they didn't exist. Captain Hollis Crane sat behind a desk polished to a shine, a man with a folksy smile and a framed photo of him shaking hands with half the county. He waved Clay in like they were old friends, then glanced toward the lobby as if the girl were a minor inconvenience. "I heard about your little visitor," Crane said, tone warm, dismissive. "Cute thing. Makes the place feel human." Clay didn't sit. He stood with his weight balanced, the way he used to stand before knocking on doors that might swing open with trouble. "It's not cute," Clay said evenly. "She showed up late, shaking. Rex growled at a man watching her. That's not normal. Crane's smile tightened at the edges, like a rubber band stretched too far. Clay, he sighed, as if indulging a paranoid uncle. She's a lonely kid. The dog is therapy for her. Don't make it a case. The words came too quickly, too rehearsed. An answer waiting on the shelf before the question was even asked. Clay held Crane's gaze and saw something slip behind it. Impatience, yes, but also a flicker of calculation, like the captain was weighing how much Clay had noticed. A man was in the lobby, Clay pressed. Not staff, not a regular. And your K9 went into warning posture. Crane leaned back, hands folding over his stomach. People come in for all sorts of reasons. Soda, forms, directions. You know that. Then he added, softer, almost paternal. You're retired. You don't need the stress. Let the station handle station things. Clay's skin prickled at the phrasing. Handle it, as in bury it. He nodded once, like he accepted the dismissal, and turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, eyes sliding to the corner of the hall where the lobby security monitor flickered. The camera feed showed the counter, the chairs, the bulletin board. It showed the kennel gate from a decent angle. But the front entrance, the exact spot where the man had stood, where the girl had stepped in, was only partially visible, cut off by a blind wedge of wall. Clay's mind did a quick, cold measurement. If someone stood just inside the door, they could be seen only as a shoulder, a shadow. No face, no clear identification, not an accident, not in a building designed around sightlines. Clay looked back at Crane, and Crane's smile returned too smoothly, like it had never faltered. Old system, Crane said, following Clay's gaze without missing a beat. Budget hasn't allowed upgrades. You know how it is. Clay forced a polite grunt and walked out, but his thoughts were already moving like chess pieces. A kid showing up daily wasn't a problem until you asked why. A man just passing by wasn't a threat until you checked the tape. A camera blind spot wasn't suspicious until you realized it was positioned like protection for someone who needed to remain unseen. Clay stepped back into the lobby and watched the girl curl over her cup of water while Rex stayed planted at the gate, still guarding like he was on assignment. The station went on pretending it was normal, and that, more than the growl, more than the rain, was what told Clay the danger wasn't outside anymore. It was in the walls. Clay didn't push the captain again that night. He did what veterans do when the room feels wrong. He watched, collected, and waited for the truth to slip. The girl stayed at the kennel gate only a few minutes, shoulders tight, eyes flicking to the lobby window every time headlights swept through the rain, and Rex behaved less like a retired department mascot and more like a dog on assignment. He rose from his cot, paced once, then planted himself near the chain link with his body angled so he could see both the girl and the door. And then he did something Clay hadn't seen him do all week. He kept returning to the girl's backpack as if it were a suspect. Rex leaned in, nose working along the zipper seam, then backed away a half step, then leaned in again. Sniff, retreat, sniff, like the scent pulled on an old memory, and he was trying to place it without spooking the child. It wasn't the frantic curiosity of a hungry dog. It was the controlled investigation of a trained one, recognition flickering behind his steady eyes. The girl noticed, too. Her fingers tightened around the strap, and she subtly turned the bag so the dog couldn't reach the side pocket. A small protective move that told Clay she knew the bag mattered. "Rex," Clay murmured under his breath, not to calm him, but to listen to him. And Rex answered with stillness, ears pricked, muzzle close to the wire, breathing shallow, tracking something that wasn't visible. When the girl finally left, she didn't wave goodbye. She moved like she was slipping out of a building that might become dangerous if she stayed too long. And Rex watched her until the door shut, then stared at that blind corner of the camera feed as if daring it to show him what it refused to show. Clay waited a full minute before he moved, then drifted toward the lobby chairs where the girl had sat earlier and scanned the floor the way he used to scan crime scenes. Not for drama, for proof. Near the chair leg, half hidden by a damp footprint, he saw a small folded paper that looked like it had fallen from a child's pocket. He picked it up carefully, as if fingerprints still mattered, even in a town that liked to pretend it had none. The front was a crayon drawing. Rex, unmistakable, big ears and a proud chest. A cartoon badge around his neck, the kind of sweet, lopsided art adults pin to fridges. But in the lower corner, drawn smaller and darker, was something that didn't belong in a kid's doodle. 3 blocky initials beside a simple symbol, 2 stacked triangles like a chevron, and below that, a string of numbers that looked too neat to be random. An address? A locker code? A case tag? Clay's stomach tightened at the mismatch between innocence and intent. He slid the paper into his jacket and headed for the records terminal, because if a child was carrying codes, then someone had taught her to. He logged in under the temporary consulting access they'd given him for K-9 evaluations and pulled up Rex's history, the old deployment notes the department liked to brag about at parades. The screen loaded the basics: certifications, commendations, medical summaries. Then hit a blank where one particular incident report should have been. A red file not found that made no sense in a system that stored every parking ticket for 20 years. Clay searched again, different terms, different dates, then tried the archival tab where older case materials lived. Same result. Missing. Not misfiled, missing. Like someone had reached into the past and pulled out the one thread that could unravel the whole sweater. Behind him, the lobby printer whirred and stopped, and the sudden silence felt heavy, like the building itself was listening. Clay looked back toward the captain's office, then toward the security monitor with its convenient blind spot at the front door, and the pieces clicked into a shape he didn't like. Rex recognized something on that backpack. The girl carried a kid drawing that wasn't just a kid drawing, and the record that might explain why was gone on purpose. In the rain outside, a car idled a little too long at the curb before rolling away, and Clay understood with cold clarity that someone wasn't just watching the girl. They were managing what the station was allowed to know. The next morning, while Briar Hollow still wore the damp hush that follows an all-night rain, Clay found himself standing outside a door he wasn't supposed to notice. One of those interior doors that always seemed locked unless you had the right name on your badge. He didn't kick it in. He didn't need to. In stations like this, the truth rarely hid behind steel. It hid behind manners. A junior clerk, sympathetic and tired, had mentioned an unexpected meeting with town officials, and Clay's instincts had carried him to the administrative wing like a compass needle snapping north. Through the frosted glass, voices drifted in clipped, careful tones, the kind people use when they want to sound reasonable while doing something rotten. Clay stood still, body angled away, so anyone passing would assume he was just reading the hallway notices, and he listened. "We're not saying he's a bad dog," a smooth male voice said, the words buttered with politeness. "We're saying he's a liability." Another voice, female, crisp, practiced, followed immediately. "Liability, cost, optics. If anything happens, if there's an incident, the county will ask why an older K-9 is still on site. We can't afford the headlines." A third voice, lower and more impatient, cut in. "Transfer him. quietly. Put him somewhere that doesn't invite attention. Clay's pulse slowed, not from calm but from focus. He recognized the vocabulary: budget, liability, optics, clean words that could be stapled to any ugly decision and passed around like paperwork. The kind of language that made harm sound like housekeeping. Captain Hollis Crane spoke next. That same folksy cadence Clay had heard in the office yesterday, only now it was sharper, less for show. We're already stretched thin: feed, vet bills, maintenance. And he's technically retired. Keeping him here is a courtesy, not a requirement. Someone chuckled softly, like the point had been made. Exactly, the smooth voice said. A courtesy that's becoming a risk. Clay pictured Rex behind the chain link, eyes alert, body between the girl and the door, and the word risk turned in his mind like a knife. Because the risk they were talking about wasn't the dog biting someone or slipping on the tile. It was the dog remembering something. It was the dog reacting to the wrong person at the wrong time. It was the dog, with his unblinking honesty, refusing to play along. We can frame it as a compassionate retirement, the female voice continued. A farm placement, a veteran's home, something that photographs well. Photographs well. Clay nearly smiled, and the bitterness of it surprised even him. This wasn't about compassion. This was containment. It was removing a witness that couldn't be intimidated, bribed, or bullied into forgetting. Clay heard papers shuffle, the faint tap of a pen. Timing matters, the impatient voice said. We do it this week, before it becomes a situation. A situation. Clay's mind flashed to the girl's drawing, to those initials and chevrons, to the missing file that should have explained why Rex's nose kept returning to her backpack like it had found a ghost. The clean language inside the room couldn't hide the panic under it. People who were truly concerned about budgets didn't move this fast. People worried about optics didn't speak like they were racing a clock. And the attention they wanted to avoid, Clay could feel it like static, had a name even if nobody said it. The little girl who showed up daily, the dog who went still when she entered, and whatever truth lived between them like a buried wire. Clay took a slow breath and stepped back from the door as footsteps approached inside, the meeting breaking up in the neat, controlled way powerful people end conversations, before anyone can ask the wrong question. He walked away at a normal pace, because veterans didn't run unless bullets flew, and because running would tell the wrong people he'd heard them. But as he moved down the hallway, Clay's thoughts stacked like evidence bags. They wanted Rex gone, they wanted it quiet, and they wanted it now. Which meant Rex wasn't just a dog in a kennel. He was a problem they couldn't solve any other way. And the only reason men in expensive words feared a retired K9 this much was because somewhere in Rex's past, somewhere inside that missing file, was a truth that could crush them if it ever made it to daylight. For 2 days after that closed-door meeting, the station's front chime never rang at the hour it had begun to expect it. And the absence felt louder than any siren. The lobby carried on. Reports filed, cuffs clicked, coffee brewed. But the small ritual that had threaded calm through the afternoons was gone, and Clay found himself watching the door the way Rex did, like a man listening for a storm before it hits. On the first day, Deputy Lyle shrugged and said, maybe her folks finally picked her up, as if that was the neat ending the world owed them. On the second day, Sergeant Mallory's face hardened a fraction, her eyes lingering on the kennel hall like she didn't want to admit she'd noticed the missing beat. Rex noticed. Rex always noticed. He stayed closer to the gate than usual, ears tilted toward the lobby, rising at every footstep, then settling again with a restraint that made Clay's skin itch. It wasn't worry in the human sense, it was vigilance, the kind that comes when the protected asset disappears without explanation. Clay spent those 2 days doing what he could without lighting himself on fire. He rechecked Rex's files, tried alternate archive paths, requested access through training documentation, and hit the same dead ends that felt too clean to be accidental. He called a former contact at county records. The call connected, a voice answered, and then the line went dead mid-sentence as if someone had cut a wire. He stared at his phone, listening to the silence, and felt the old deployment chill creep up his spine. Deadlines were never just deadlines. That night, when he drove home, a dark sedan sat parked across from the station lot. Engine idling, headlights off, the kind of stillness that wasn't resting, but watching. The next morning it was there again, a little farther down the street, as if it wanted to be seen but not confronted. Clay didn't confront it. He memorized it. Make, shape, the faint dent near the rear bumper. Surveillance wasn't always about secrecy. Sometimes it was about pressure, a silent hand on the back of your neck. On the third afternoon, the rain eased into a thin, gray drizzle, and the chime finally rang. Soft, hopeful, and Clay's body tightened as the door opened. The girl stepped in, but she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, like a public display of guardianship, and his smile was too wide, too polished, the kind of smile that existed to disarm witnesses. He wore a clean jacket and carried himself like someone who expected rooms to make space for him. "Afternoon," he said brightly to the desk, voice warm enough to sound harmless. "Just bringing my niece by. She's been talking about this dog non-stop." Clay watched the girl's face. She didn't smile. Her eyes stayed down. Her body was rigid in a way no happy child's body ever was. And the hand on her shoulder looked gentle, only if you didn't know how control worked. Rex rose the instant he saw them, and the transformation was immediate. The soft calm vanished, replaced by that straight-backed professional posture Clay had seen in real operations. Rex's ears pinned forward, muzzle lifted, eyes locked on the smiling man, and a low, steady growl vibrated through the chain link, measured, warning, controlled. The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flicked to the dog with a quick, assessing calculation. "Whoa," he chuckled, as if amused. "He always liked that." Sergeant Mallory stood, her chair scraping. "Rex," she said sharply, but Clay could hear the uncertainty under her command. Rex didn't back down. He stared as if he knew the man's name without anyone saying it. The girl's fingers tightened around her backpack strap, knuckles white, and she shifted half an inch closer to the gate, seeking the dog's protection the way a drowning person seeks a rope. Clay stepped forward before he could overthink it, voice mild, face neutral. "He's trained," Clay said. "He doesn't growl for fun." The man turned that bright smile toward Clay, as if they were old friends. Up close, the smile looked less warm and more practiced. "And you are?" "Consultant," Clay replied, letting the word carry the weight of experience without giving away his angles. "Clay Mercer." The man's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Recognition or irritation, Clay couldn't tell. Then widened again into charm. "Ah, the famous dog man. I've heard about you." He said it like a compliment, but it landed like a warning wrapped in velvet. The girl didn't speak. She didn't offer her snack. She just stared at Rex with a silent plea in her eyes. And Clay understood. Someone had decided the station was still useful, but only if the girl arrived under supervision. Only if the truth stayed leashed. Later, as the man guided her back toward the door, still smiling, still performing, the girl glanced once over her shoulder at Clay, a look so quick it could be missed, and in it was a message without words. They're watching. As if to confirm it, Clay's phone buzzed the moment the door shut. It was a colleague from the old days, a deputy he trusted just enough to know fear when he heard it. "Clay," the voice said, low and urgent. "Listen to me. Drop it. You're stepping on important toes." "Important toes don't scare me," Clay said, keeping his eyes on the street where that same dark sedan sat idling like a patient predator. There was a pause. Then the voice returned thinner, strained. "These toes," the deputy whispered, "wear expensive shoes." The line clicked, dead again, leaving Clay staring at his screen while Rex, behind the gate, remained rigid, eyes fixed on the door as if he expected the smiling man to come back. Clay slid the phone into his pocket and felt the station's air change, thickening with invisible pressure. Whoever wanted Rex gone wasn't merely arranging paperwork anymore. They were tightening the net. Around the dog, around the girl, and now, unmistakably, around him. Near midnight, when the station lights had thinned to a few humming rectangles and the rain became a whisper on the roof, Clay felt someone pause behind him. He turned to see Mara Quinn, the night dispatcher, clutching a manila envelope and a plastic flash drive like they were contraband. Mara was invisible in the best way, calm voice, clean logs. But tonight, her eyes were red, the look of someone who'd hit a moral wall. "I can't sleep," she said. "Not after what I saw them do to the system." Clay didn't reach for the items yet. He just nodded once, giving her room to choose courage. Her badge lanyard shook against her ribs, a quiet metronome of fear and resolve tonight, together. Mara swallowed, then shoved the envelope into his hands. Inside were printed dispatch logs, time-stamped, highlighted, and a still photo torn from a video frame. The station lobby, the entrance area, except the angle was different from the public monitor, wide enough to catch faces. "I found this on the old backup," Mara whispered. "The feed they said didn't record. It did. Someone just rerouted it." Clay's pulse slowed into focus. He slid the flash drive into his pocket, eyes on her. "Why bring it to me?" Mara's gaze flicked toward the captain's office like the walls might carry sound. "Because everyone else is pretending," she said. "And because your dog knows." Clay led her into the kennel hall where Rex lay alert but quiet. And the moment Mara stepped close, Rex rose and sniffed the envelope's edge, then the flash drive's plastic, then Clay's coat, sniff, back, sniff, like he was verifying custody with his nose. Mara's hands trembled. "That little girl," she continued. "She isn't coming here because she likes dogs. She's checking the only place she thinks is safe." 2 weeks ago, there was an incident on Old Mill Road, supposedly a false alarm. But dispatch got a private call first, from a blocked line, telling us to stand down. Then Rex's unit went anyway. Afterward, the report was filed. And then it vanished. Clay's mind flashed to the missing record. Mara tapped the highlighted log. "Here, the caller used initials. Those same initials that keep popping up in restricted notes. And here's why they're panicking." She pointed to the still frame, a man in a neat jacket, guiding the girl through the station lobby, smiling too wide, and behind him, half a step back, Captain Crane, watching like a handler. Clay's stomach dropped. "The girl's father filed a complaint," Mara said, voice thin with disgust, "about what's happening at their property. It never made it to county. It got intercepted." Rex was there the night it started, and Rex reacted to someone at the scene. Someone important. If Rex stays, and if that kid keeps coming, the truth doesn't stay buried. Rex stared at Clay, then at Mara, then toward the lobby, and from deep in his chest, he gave one low, steady woof, as if confirming every word. By dawn, the station felt like a pot set too close to the flame. Quiet on the surface, pressure building where nobody wanted to look. And Clay moved through it with the calm of a man who'd learned that panic only helps the people doing wrong. He didn't argue with Captain Crane, didn't make speeches in the lobby, didn't give the town a chance to circle wagons. He made one call to an external contact he still trusted. A state investigator who owed him a favor and didn't owe Briar Hollow anything. And then he made a second call, internal affairs. Because corruption hates sunlight most when it comes from outside. When they arrived, they didn't stroll in like visitors. They came in like a storm front, badges out, faces set. And the first thing they did was secure the servers and pull the real camera backups before anyone could lose them again. The lobby door chime rang and rang as more plainclothes officers filed through, and you could feel the station's air change. Every laugh dying, every whispered conversation turning into a swallowed breath. Captain Crane tried the folksy veneer one last time, palms open, voice smooth, talking about misunderstandings and budget constraints. But the lead investigator cut him off with a single sentence that landed like a gavel. "We have warrants." Then the building became a sequence of hard cuts. Boots in hallways, doors opening fast, paper rustling, radios murmuring, and the dominoes began to fall in the exact order Clay had hoped for and feared at the same time. A deputy's desk drawer was opened. A sealed folder was removed. A backroom office computer was unplugged and bagged. A town consultant who smiled too much was met at the entrance, informed he wasn't leaving, and his smile finally cracked when he saw the cuffs. In the kennel hall, Rex stood silent and steady, eyes tracking every movement like he understood the language of accountability better than most humans did. And then, as if the world insisted on bringing the heart of the story to the center, the little girl arrived, alone this time, hair still damp from morning fog, backpack hugged tight against her chest. She stopped at the gate and looked up at Clay with a courage that didn't belong on a child's shoulders. "Is it true?" she whispered. "They're taking him away?" Clay crouched so he was level with her, careful with his voice, careful with his face, because this was the moment that would either heal or shatter. "No," he said gently. "No one's taking Rex." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry yet, like she'd been rationing tears for weeks. "I had to keep coming," she said, the words spilling out now that the dam had a crack. "Every day I checked. Because if Rex was gone, then the last thing that knew the truth would be gone too." She told it simply. No graphic details. Just a child's clean terror. Men had been pressuring her family, pushing them off their land with threats dressed up as offers. And the night her father finally refused, something happened that was supposed to be erased. Except Rex had been there, and Rex had reacted. And Rex's handler report was the one thing they couldn't fully control. So she came to the only place she believed still had rules, to the only creature she trusted not to lie. Behind them, in the lobby, a warrant was read aloud. A voice protested. Another voice answered with the cold finality of law. And the sound of cuffs clicking shut echoed down the hall like the first honest noise the building had made in a long time. Weeks later, when the headlines had names and the town had apologies it didn't know how to say, The station windows caught a slice of clean sunlight that turned dust motes into drifting gold. The girl stood by Rex's gate, not as a frightened visitor now, but as someone allowed to breathe. And Rex rested his head against her shoulder with that measured tenderness only a veteran dog could offer. Clay watched from the doorway, arms folded, feeling the tight knot in his chest finally loosen. And for the first time in days, he let himself exhale, long and slow, as if the whole town could begin again on the other side of the truth.